The Hog's Die is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsdie.com.
It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business, the show where we look at the sports, media, business, legal, industrial complex about the sports that we love and love to watch. Big weekend here as we start the NFL season, which will be a content monster for us over the next couple months. We're down to our two-man skeleton crew. How you doing, Steve?
Oh, doing all right. Yeah, it's fun to we finally got into the opening game of the season. Love that. And you're right, the NFL is just a treasure trove of content. For shows like this, there's just so many things that happen that are both really, really dumb and really, really smart. We'll talk about them, as the weeks go on, of course. But I think it's safe to say that some of what we're talking about is on the dumb side. For sure. Not dumb to us, but people who are dumb who are generating content, for us.
And sometimes even not even metaphorically, as we'll discuss here in a couple minutes.
Oh yeah, I meant literally. I didn't mean metaphorically. I meant literally. I really and truly did. But no, yeah. I mean, this is a great time of year, for sports. The NFL is so smart in starting. Their season sort of in conjunction with the start of the new TV season. It probably just worked out that way more by accident more than anything else. But the idea that, it's always been, the NFL is sort of the kickoff of the fall television season. And I think that boosts ratings for everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is a little bit off the cuff, but I had never yet seen Netflix buy commercial time to promote a specific show ever on television. And then I noticed a couple commercials pop up on Thursday's broadcast on NBC with Netflix buying airtime for their show, The Dark Crystal, which one episode it is pretty good. Which I was like, wow, okay, so we know that NFL really does introduce the television schedule for the networks. But seeing Netflix advertise their shows on that medium, I don't think I've ever seen that before. That was a first for me.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that either. But the one thing, I'm not a huge Netflix person. I don't watch Netflix a ton. But I actually did go out and watch the Dave Chappelle Sticks and Stones comedy
Stand-up?
special. Stand-up. Thank you, stand-up thing you did, because I saw there was so much controversy with it. The critics absolutely hated it. The fans loved it, and so I watched it for myself, and I gotta say, hilarious. I would A+, from Dave Chappelle. I thought it was, very unpolitically correct, which I always think is a good thing. The critics, I think, hated it because it was so, politically incorrect, and these, mind-numbingly stupid Hollywood critics just can't handle that. But I thought it was interesting that Chappelle was utterly unafraid to bust every political correct stereotype for every racial group, every group, all of that. So A+ to Chappelle, and it just goes to show that my thought, which has always been that if the critics hate it, I need to go see it, still applies.
Classic. So even in the world of streaming content, which is revolutionizing television, which we've talked about before, they are still seeing the NFL as a can't-miss opportunity to reach mass eyeballs. So that's just a little interesting data point. So just like you're going to get advertisements for the upcoming CBS shows, like whatever Chicago Hope Rescue Edition or whatever shows they have there, you're going to get Netflix ads as well. So interesting. So that leads us into a little bit of Thursday Night Football on NBC, which is officially the kickoff for a couple things. One, kickoff of NBC's football lineup for the year. It's the kickoff to the NFL season, and of course, it's the kickoff to the centennial season, this 100th year, which we're going to be beaten over the head. Everyone put on their leather helmets because we're going to get just pummeled with this 100 years piece. And NBC just right out of the gate with one of the most ridiculous broadcasts of a major sporting event I have ever seen in my life. Some of you may have noticed that all three of the key talking heads, the booth crew and the sideline reporter, were all in 1920s appropriate outfits for the broadcast, including poor Michelle Trefoya, a longtime professional, well-respected sideline reporter, NFL reporter, sports journalist, sports broadcaster, all of those things. The poor woman sitting on the sidelines doing her job in the most embarrassing pseudo-20s flapper outfit you could ever see. They couldn't obviously, they didn't have her in like a dress. They made it a little bit better, I guess. But it was sad to watch. I felt like calling NBC HR, honestly. Like, how do you humiliate your staff in front of that many people watching? Also, it was just a stupid, dumb bit, and their whole broadcast was an embarrassment. And I wouldn't even necessarily, well, yes, I would care, but it would be an afterthought if then what we watched on the field, everyone involved with Thursday Night Football, including the NFL, should have really been upset by what happened on what should have been one of their biggest nights of the year. And if we have a great game, no one's talking about it. But the game was the on-the-field equivalent of Michelle Trefoya in a bad Halloween costume.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the flapper thing is dumb. And I'm sure if Michelle Tafoya herself were here, she'd probably say, oh, I thought it was fun and it was great. And she'd toe the party line, without a doubt. But I do think, I'm normally the one that's the least politically correct, you'll ever know. I do think there's a difference between making the men put on suits that look a little bit old and then making a woman dress up as a flapper. That's a completely different outfit and a different thing. And is it degrading? It's only degrading if Michelle Tafoya thought it was degrading, and if she was fine with it, I'm fine with it. I just think it's dumb. It's just stupid more than anything.
And I'm not even the gendered element, and because it wasn't like she wasn't. It was sort of the male equivalent of 20s professional garb, I guess. I would even make it non-gendered. It was just humiliating for these professionals to have to participate in this stupid gag.
I think it's dumb. That's all. It's dumb. But in terms of the game look, isn't this an argument for the preseason?
Yes.
Because I agree, it was a defensive battle for sure. If you saw the Chicago O-line in particular just absolutely dominated and made the Green Bay offensive line look just silly. The Green Bay defensive line made sorry, I screwed that up. The Oakland defensive line made the Green Bay offensive line look stupid. Aaron Rodgers has not thrown a pass before Thursday night since last season. He's a Hall of Famer and all that, but you know what? He needs work. So maybe the NFL does need the preseason. They need a few games, and, maybe the starters need to play. Maybe Aaron Rodgers needs to throw a few passes to get ready for the season. So maybe that's the lesson.
It almost feels like, and I think we talked a little bit about this last season, and it was definitely part of the national conversation, and a lot of the kind of retired GMs and coaches and players were saying this. They said, look, if you're not going to have a preseason, and you're not going to do something that at least equates longer practices, whatever, if you're not going to, you're going to expect 4 to 5 weeks of horrible product. That's what you just have to accept that. And I think even Bill Belichick said something interesting about this last year. But and I think we all saw that. But we've had some pretty good opening night games over the last couple of years. And I think Thursday really just brought home to roost that you're basically asking people to do on-the-job training and to just put up with a level of football that isn't what people expect, especially on primetime television. And that yes, the first 4 games of the season are essentially the new preseason.
Yeah, and don't forget, remember that the current CBA, which was done in 2010, severely limited the amount of practice time, generally speaking, during the season, and it also eliminated two-a-days. Now, I don't know, Chris, I don't know if you played football in your olden days. I don't think you did.
No.
Okay. Two-a-days are actually kind of critical. Everybody hates two-a-days, because they're just miserable, but they actually serve a purpose, and and the purpose is to really kind of get you in football shape, get you in the right mindset, get a lot of training done in a short amount of time. If you don't have any of that, and you don't play, your starters during the preseason games more than a handful of snaps, there's a reason why the beginning of the season looks worse than maybe it used to. And that's what we highlighted on the Packers and Raiders game. When you guys hear this, the opening weekend games will have already occurred, and so we don't know. Recording this today, we don't know how it's going to look. But my guess is that we're going to see a bunch of sloppy football. That's my guess. Let us know how it was by the time the show comes up. But that's my guess.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I think we're all somewhat conditioned to understanding that. But I do think with the changes that have gone through the preseason, the changes with how front offices and coaching staffs manage the preseason, the problem is getting bigger and more acute. So I think we're past this normal stage of, it's going to take them a couple weeks for the play to improve. I think we're at a different level now. And so it'd be really interesting to track what the level of play is. I know that, we're obviously a kind of Washington-based, Redskins-based podcasting network, but I think it's funny that the one angle people are giving the Washington to beat Philadelphia is the sloppiness and unpredictability of week 1.
It's our only chance. Yeah. I have a question for you about this. Like I said, the CBA has greatly limited the amount of practice time. What I wonder is, does the Players Association really and truly want to limit practice time, or is that just a negotiating tactic to generate more money?
Probably a little bit of both. And I think that the issues are going to be real enough. Well, I don't know, maybe I'm an optimist here, but the issues are going to be real enough to bring both sides to the table to understand that for the long-term success of the product and the fan base and they've got real issues to look at. I know that the NFL is a giant, but there is ratings, gate receipts, there are negative trends. So I think they're going to be willing to look at different things. Some of the stuff we kind of talked about in our last episode, but there's lots of ways you could start to think about how you reform how teams prep. And yes, that probably the players will angle for, whether it's game checks for preseason or what an 18-game season would mean, expanded rosters, expansion of off-season activities, whatever. I think they're going to have to hammer out a solution that both ensures that they have good product and that people are fairly compensated. But I think that both sides have to admit the CBA has to fix some of this.
I do think that game checks during the preseason is something that the NFLPA ought to not give up on. And I don't know if I definitely know I don't mean full game checks, as per season, the regular season, because the TV money just isn't there. But I do think that, equity dictates that the NFL ought to pay these players something, whatever the numbers are during the preseason, because it's 4 weeks of their lives. It is a game that is broadcast that the NFL is making money on. And so why aren't they paying the players for the preseason? Well, the answer is nobody's forced them to. Yeah, that's the end. That's the short version. So I do think that something needs to be worked out where there's some sort of limited payment. That's not just their $100 a day stipend or whatever the number is they get for training camp. There ought to be a game check. Limited, come up with the right number, but I think there ought to be a game check, for the preseason. That would certainly, I just think it's fair, more than anything.
Yeah, so. I think that I think they're gonna have to figure it out. All right, so that was that. We'll move on to some other NFL topics here. We can't seem to untangle ourselves, get unsnared from the Antonio Brown drama, which I agree with our fellow co-host Rick Snyder, who said on Twitter, even with everything going on with Antonio Brown, how could HBO have produced the most boring Hard Knocks of all time? So shout out to Rick for a great observation there. But because what's the real world story of Antonio Brown and the Raiders is a wild, wild ride. we've got probably 3 angles we could come at this story, but the newest one that literally dropped as we were closing our subjects for this episode was, whatever this bizarre social media short video was, which is, he's known for that. He's like his secret desire is to be a social media manager for some company, but he produced it. It's cheesy. It's dumb. You would eye roll at it, except that part of the content is pretty obviously a phone recording with John Gruden that I'd be willing to bet he did not have permission to record nor broadcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's funny because the show you missed, Chris, John and I talked about Helmetgate, and that was a month ago, and he's been in the news almost every day since. Antonio Brown is just a complete idiot, in my book. But yeah, the video you're talking about is really, really interesting. He posted that to his Instagram. Now, I wasn't sure about the California recording laws, and so I asked an open question on Twitter. Hey, does anybody know what the law in California is? The response I got, which I think is right, but I can't verify, I think is right, is that it's a 2-party consent state. Okay.
I've seen other journalists confirm that, so I think that's true.
So what that means is that if you're going to record a phone call, both parties have to consent to it. Like we're basically doing this podcast via phone line right now. We've both consented to it. There's not a crime, no matter what. Well, if Antonio is secretly recording his phone call with John Gruden, it's actually a crime. It could be a felony, depending on the elements. Now, John Gruden is never going to file a police report over it. He's going to laugh it off. And so it's not going to go anywhere. But here's the more interesting thing to me. The video, is really Gruden being the phone call in the video really shows that Gruden is sort of sympathetic to Antonio, and really what it really means is he just wants him on the field. He doesn't care about any of this. What he's done is he's completely emasculated Mike Mayock, completely and totally undercut all of Mike Mayock's authority because Antonio Brown called him a racial slur. And I know, quite frankly, if it's a racial slur of a white man, usually that goes nowhere in terms of the public apathy and all of that. And it really didn't this time. But the fact of the matter is he used a racial slur against his boss and threatened to hit him.
Yeah, well, the threat to hit him is almost the top of the food chain here in bad behavior.
Oh, yeah. Clearly so. But the two of those things together would get any other player cut. Absolutely any other player cut. And so the interesting dynamic here, remember that John Gruden has final say-so over the roster. Okay? Mayock is the GM, but at the end of the day, Gruden, with the 9-year contract, has the final say. And so what he did, so Mike Mayock, this incident happened last Wednesday. So Mayock comes out and through, the Raiders PR says, Antonio, we're going to suspend Antonio Brown for this. Well, what Gruden has done is go, no, we need him Monday, and completely undercut all of Mayock's authority whatsoever. I don't know how any player could take Mike Mayock seriously anymore. Because, the star player called him racial slurs, threatened to hit him, and absolutely nothing but a fine that nobody cares about. And it's like a, Burger King cheeseburger to Antonio Brown got levied, and he's going to play. By all accounts, at least. Again, you're going to hear this after the game Monday night, but by all accounts, he's going to play. So I think the Raiders handled this incredibly poorly. I think they should have cut him and been done with it. And so to explain it to everybody, how that maneuver could have been done is if Brown's conduct is bad enough that it allows the Raiders to fine him, that allows the Raiders to void his guarantees in his contract. And not only that, then if they had suspended him for game 1, that also eliminates the contractual guarantees. You can't come in on week 2. And so with the guarantees gone, they could have just cut him and got rid of him because he had a really small signing bonus. He had years guaranteed. So with the guarantees gone, they could have been done with. He could have been a civilian today, and the Raiders just didn't do that. So they undercut Mike Mayock. They let him get away with it, and they're going to let him keep all his money, despite the fact that he called the GM racial slurs and threatened to hit him. And I think the Raiders did absolutely the wrong thing. And if I had been in charge, he'd have been off the team.
It's amazing to me. I probably agree. I think he'd be off my team too. It's amazing, especially this. Like, listen, if you got the wrong contract and you're saddled with it, then you figure out a way to make it work. They have multiple versions of a golden ticket. They could have been out of this scenario with the only loss being a 3rd and 5th round draft pick. Now, draft picks are good. Like, that hurts a little. But you're not you would be out of salary cap jail on this with a freaking monopoly get out of free jail card. He didn't even qualify for his $500,000 bonus check about time served in preseason because of the helmet and the foot and whatever, all that. So there was even reports, like, I think early in the week, where they would have been out $1 million, something around there. That actually, once you comb through the contract and what happened this preseason, they wouldn't even have been on the hook for the $1 million, which is not even that much money for an NFL team. But they were literally at 0 salary cap implications to get this guy off their team. And listen, the Raiders aren't going to the Super Bowl this year. Antonio Brown is not a difference maker in terms of, especially with a coach and an administration on a 9-year contract. This is not a make or break year, right? It's not suck it up and take your shot, which we may have a conversation around Elliott and the Cowboys. Like, there's not even that scenario. There's not even any danger to the coach or the administration. This would have been the easiest break in modern NFL history to get out of a mistake.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Listen, I mean, Antonio Brown is the GM of the Oakland Raiders, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. He's proven that there's nothing this man can't do short of being hauled away in handcuffs by the local sheriff's office that is going to get him off the team. And I also think it makes John Gruden look foolish, too. How much nonsense is John Gruden willing to put up with just because this man can play football? As it turns out, he's willing to put up with almost anything. Because think about what we've had. We talked again a month ago about this foot thing and the helmet thing. We've been through that, and both of those are self-inflicted wounds. Antonio Brown did the foot thing to himself through stupidity. The helmet is just none of the helmet stuff. There was no reason to go through any of that. He should have just said, I'll find another helmet, and that's the end of it, and period. Instead, he makes this whole big issue out of it, and then we roll into this, the argument with Mayock, and then we have the video. It's never ending with this guy. There's no way I would want him around. And I think that he's made John Gruden, he's undercut Mike Mayock's authority. He's made John Gruden look absolutely foolish. And you're right. I think HBO is probably kicking itself that all this stuff happened. Half the stuff happened after Hard Knocks, because I didn't. To be perfectly honest with you, I didn't even get through all of Hard Knocks.
Oh, it was a snooze fest.
I didn't even watch the last episode. I might eventually. Yeah, it was just utterly uninteresting.
Yeah, bring back the Browns. I find it just incredible that any of this is really happening. And then, John, as to your point. So, okay, John Gruden makes a calculated decision. I've got to coddle this guy, whatever. I can kind of understand some of that from football reasons. You don't treat all players the same. Anyone who says that is a moron. But then, so what does John Gruden get? What does he get for sticking in the player's corner? He gets humiliated with this video. He's immediately rewarded. It's like, it's what happens when you pet a cobra. They're not lap animals. So, he got immediately bitten.
I think we just came up with another good show title. This is what happens when you pet a cobra. I like that. Yeah, that's exactly right. And Gruden at this point has no choice but to laugh it off and go, ha, I love it. Because what's he going to say now? This is what's going to throw him over the top after all this? I mean, I don't know. I mean, Mayock doesn't need the money. He's wealthy. I'd almost be willing to resign over it, if I were him. Because he's just completely undercut all authority. Who's the next guy that acts up? Is Mayock going to tell him, you can't do it? What's going to happen then when Khalil Mack or somebody, acts up?
Luckily they traded Khalil Mack already.
Sorry, but I mean, you're right. But my point is, what happens if David Carr, say, Derek Carr? God dang, I'm bad today. What happens if Derek Carr mouths off? Nothing's going to happen, and that's what we've shown.
But also, I want to take 2 other points on this. One, Who thought hiring Mike Mayock, was a good idea to run an NFL team at this stage? There is a
Good on
difference.
TV though, Chris.
I know. So, are we that surprised that this guy is not really prepared to run an NFL franchise at this level, coming from the media? And I actually like the media more than Steve, so that's not even necessarily a blanket cut. But I'm not turning over my franchise to someone who was, writing draft grades as a horrible content sewage just a year earlier. A and B. He did make a mistake in terms of understanding how to handle a player like Antonio Brown, which you advocated for signing. So you brought him in. You could make an argument you just never brought him in, but they did. You don't go and post his fine tape to his locker, and not expect that to blow up. Know how to handle it. Take him aside, talk to him. I heard Cooley on his podcast had a good rant on this. Again, it's another pet the Cobra situation. You don't humiliate him like he's some practice squad player and not expect for it to blow up. This is a dude that was Facebook living after a playoff loss in Pittsburgh. Know your situation.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you publicly air the good stuff and you do the bad stuff privately. Even the Redskins wouldn't have done this, right? They could have humiliated Monte Nicholson, for example, and started talking about his situation, but instead they just said we're aware of it and we're dealing with it and blah, 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 and that was the end of it. That's all they had to say with Antonio Brown. We're aware of all these issues and we're dealing with it in-house, period, the end.
Because you're right. The fine money
Go
wasn't
ahead.
a lot of money. Right, so I would have maybe even waived it at that point if you're trying to really you get the relationship on the right track. But certainly don't take your kind of drop in the bucket fine and slap it on his locker to humiliate him in front of the 65 other guys or whatever.
Yeah, and the CBA doesn't require that. They have to give a written notice of it. Obviously they don't need to tape it to its locker like it's an episode of Major League, like that movie.
Yeah.
When they hung the red cards in the locker. I mean. Yeah, the whole thing is just so poorly done in every way. I like Mike Mayock. Listen, I listen to him on his draft review, and I'll listen to him again when he goes back to it in a couple of years. But remember, this has been done before. Okay, the Detroit Lions hired Matt Millen out of the broadcast booth, and predictably it went poorly. You're right. I don't know why this surprises anybody. Find a football professional who's been working in a front office for years, not a guy who's been a broadcaster. I mean, people like Mike Mayock because he's got a good eye for talent. Or so that was because he presented well on the NFL Network. Really and truly, that's why, he got this job. And, more power to him. But if I were the Raiders, I would have hired some football professional and not Mayock.
Yeah.
Personally.
And we have a good test case for this theory, too, because we have John Lynch in San Francisco. He's kind of Matt Millen 2.0, and the jury is certainly still out on if he's any good for the 49ers.
Well, it's Mike Tannenbaum is on ESPN now, and he was a former GM of the Jets. Okay, if you hire Mike Tannenbaum, he's in media, but he's really a football guy.
Yeah, Louis Riddick, another one.
Yeah, there you go, Louis Riddick. I mean, those guys are people I can see, but John Lynch... Mike Mayock, I hope it works out, don't get me wrong, but I just think those kind of moves are dumb.
Even John Gruden. There's a difference between sitting in a Monday Night Football booth or whatever for 15 years and then going back into coaching. Things change. And by the way, when he interviews and watches Antonio Brown 2-3 times a year on Monday Night Football, he becomes enamored with his skills, just like all of us watching that show. But that doesn't mean, you bring him into your locker room. At that point, you can't just base it on your excitement about giving him the Gruden grinder on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see if the Raiders' offense can turn around and look like a competent offense, because you're exactly right. It's not like John Gruden is up on the cutting edge of offensive development, after broadcasting Monday Night Football for however many years it was. The whole thing is awful. It strikes whole John Gruden thing struck me as a marketing ploy designed to get people to watch in time for Las Vegas. That's what John Gruden is, because he's the personality. He's the personality out there. People love John Gruden. He's going to be great on television. Hard Knocks was basically the John Gruden show.
Yeah, for sure.
And actually, it was boring. By the way. I think that's why John Gruden's a coach more than anything. And it's not like the Raiders have ever done anything conventionally or even well in the past many decades. You
Yeah,
know,
at least 25 years.
At the end of his life, Al Davis was a wreck. You know, he was. I just think he'd lost his fastball. At the end of it. So it's been a long time since the Raiders were competent in anything. They even make the Redskins look competent in some regards. At least the Redskins didn't bring Mike Mayock in.
We could look forward to the Gruden brothers reunion in Oakland probably sometime within the next 18 months.
Yeah, that might be true. So, moral of the story, Antonio Brown, you're an idiot. The Raiders, you guys are idiots for letting him do this. Any football team worth its salt would have just cut him and, eaten it, eaten the hit on the field and been, done with it for the sake of the organization. But not the Raiders. So you guys deserve what you get.
Man, he better play well. All right, so from Steve calling one person an idiot for probably calling a few more people idiots, let's move on to the Ezekiel Elliott contract situation, which has been resolved in time for Elliott to hit the field in game 1. They're predicting anywhere from 15 to 25 carries. So that saga has been wrapped up in a pretty frilly, expensive lace bow. Tell us a little bit about this contract, Steve.
Okay, so this is really a 4-year deal, basically. The Cowboys can get out of this thing after the 2022 season if they want to. They can actually get out of it earlier if they want to. So, number one, as sort of a general proposition, I'm against signing running backs to gigantic deals. I'm far more against it when the running back is average over 300 carries a year. And Zeke, I vowed to myself to stop calling him Zeke because I hate that name. So Elliott is at 868 carries over 3 years in a career, and that's only because he was out for 6 games for a suspension. So he's really kind of a 300 carry a year guy, and that never goes well. Those guys, but for a handful of players in NFL history, almost always wear out and their effectiveness goes south. So his contract, 6 years, $90 million. I hate to admit this, but I have to because we're a business show. The Cowboys actually did this in a pretty smart way. Believe it or not. He only has a signing bonus of $7.5 million, okay? And what they've done is they've guaranteed at signing the $7.5 million, the 2019 and 2020 salaries, and then there's a bonus that will vest in March of 2020 that's also... There's a bonus that is vested that will pay in March of 2020 of $13 million. So his total guarantees at signing is only $28 million, but a huge amount of it, but let's see, 15, 16, almost $17 million of that is just salary. Almost $17 million of it is just salary. And then the 2021 salary guarantees during the 2020 offseason, and then 22 guarantees on the 5th day of the 2021 league year. So there's multiple spots here. The Cowboys can get out of this deal after 2022 pretty easily, and they could get out of it in 2021 if they wanted to. So it's not a 6-year marriage. And furthermore, the biggest cap hit that Elliott has in this entire process is $16.5 million in 2022. So it's not nearly as onerous as you might think. The dead money, $25 million in 2020, $32 million in 2019, but he's not going anywhere in these next 2 years. And then it goes down a lot from there. It's only $10.8 million in 2022. So they've actually done this in a pretty smart way. They did not give him a humongous signing bonus that's going to just cripple the dead cap money for years and years and years. By guaranteeing the salaries, the base salaries, it's limited the dead cap. And so they actually can, what they've done is they've basically given themselves options on Elliott for 2023 through 2026. That's the way, it's basically a year-to-year option after that point. And again, they can get out of him in 2 years if they wanted. If they really wanted to, they could get rid of him. So Dallas has done this in such a way as to give Elliott, who's a complete idiot himself, the ability and his agent the ability to go out and say, "Look, I'm the highest paid running back in football. I got a $90 million contract." Whereas the truth is, your butt can be gone in 2 years. 3 years, really. That's the truth of it. And so it's a sort of a win-win for everybody. And I hate to say it, but good job, Jerry Jones. That pains me to say it, believe me.
And which is sort of remarkable that he was able to get as team-friendly a deal in the end as he did, because they were over the barrel a little bit in terms of just how they had built their team. And I agree that running backs are a risky proposition, especially running backs with that much mileage on them. And he's also been relatively injury free. And we know that is, that there will be, I would predict in the next 2 years, there'll be a significant injury, just that's the law of averages to a degree. But they really had built their team, and I think Jerry Jones knows he's got about a 2-year window right now, and the way the league is set up to make a run for it. I don't think I personally would bet against it. I still think they're flawed in some ways, but it was all built around having Elliott on the team to have a 2-year window here.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And let's to be perfectly honest, this really was less about money for Elliott than it was about the ego of him being called the highest paid player in football or running back in football. That's really what it was about. And this contract allows him to do that. It allows him to do that. And Dallas basically has an option on Elliott through the prime of his career. So, I think it's an absolute win-win for Dallas. And it satisfies Elliott's ego. And let's also be honest. I agree with you about the injury. Just the law of averages says he's going to be injured, but also he's going to do something dumb. Right. This guy has the guy has a history of doing dumb things. Every year it's something else with this guy. This year it was, him, fighting with or, pushing around a security guard at like a festival. It's never ending with this dude. It's going to happen again. And Dallas is another team that's willing to put up with absolutely any conduct whatsoever, if it helps on the football field. So, short of, again, Elliott being hauled off in cuffs for murder, I don't think Dallas is going to get rid of him for that, but they could. And they're ready for the next thing because they know it's going to happen.
Do we know if there's any behavior clauses in the contract?
No, don't know. If there's anything special there, for those of you who don't know, the form NFL contract is attached to the CBA, and so you can, if you're the third string guard, you're just going to get the form contract. Here, sign this. There's no negotiation. We're just going to fill in numbers. If you're Ezekiel Elliott, the team can attach some conditions to it. Excuse me. Like the Chiefs apparently did that with the Tyreek Hill deal, and the Chiefs are another team that have proven. We don't care what you do. He's literally a child abuser, and they're going to sign him to a 3-year, $54 million contract because he's really fast. If nothing else, that shows that there are no morals in the NFL for top players. You can literally threaten your baby mama and break your child's arm and record it, and you're going to get $54 million if you're one of the top players in football. That's shameful too. But in terms of Elliott, no, I'm not aware of any extra clauses put in that contract. If he acts up, you can default him under the contract if he, basically if he's a bad representative of the Dallas Cowboys, you could figure out a way to default him.
Is that even a possible? Is there any actually way to be a bad representative of the Dallas Cowboys?
No, no. No, it's can it get worse? No, absolutely not. This is the franchise of Des Bryant and Michael Irvin, and there's no way. Elliott kind of fits the mold of those guys, to be honest. Horrible people, good players.
The real winner here, especially if you kind of couple Elliott's contract with the Jared Goff contract that was also this week, is Dak Prescott. So. That's the person who both at the positional level and the team level just got a couple pieces of strong news for his coming contract negotiation.
Yeah, Dak Prescott's kind of a weird player because Dallas has to do it, right? They've got to sign him, but there's no way the guy's a top 5 quarterback. He's just not. He's a solid quarterback. He's more of a dink and dunker, I think, than anything. He goes underneath every single time. He will take the underneath always. His deep ball is a bit lax. I don't think he's a true difference maker. He's got pretty good numbers, but a lot of it's because he goes underneath, so much. So I don't think he's a true, like, John Elway level franchise quarterback, but Dallas is going to have to pay him like that, and they're going to pay him like that. And this Elliott contract, provides Dallas with enough relief that they're probably going to be able to get it done. The truth be told, they're probably going to be able to get it done. Dallas, don't forget, had a ton of rollover cap. So they've actually got $10 million more in 2019 than the Redskins do, for example, because of all the rollover from the last year. So they have more space, and the Elliott contract isn't as onerous as what you might think. And so Prescott will get done. But I don't think he's worth 30 to 35 million. There's no way I'd pay him that, but Dallas is going to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And the precedent is there, all different kinds of angles. So that's sort of one in the queue there to watch for. I don't think it'll happen this. Well, I don't know. Can it happen this season? Can they still negotiate?
Yeah, they can.
They can.
No, he's not on the. You can't if you're on the franchise tag.
Right, then
you're
locks.
locked out. Yeah, so like Brandon Scherf or not Brandon. If the Redskins franchise Brandon Scherf next year because he's on that 5th-year option this year, then they'd have to wait. So yeah, Prescott they can. For sure. What did you think of the Tyreek Hill deal?
I mean, I don't disagree that it's gross. I don't understand where he didn't get league action. But I'm 0% shocked by it. So, like, nothing is surprising about it.
I know why he didn't get league action. You want to know why? The reason is that the woman. I don't know if she's a wife. That's why I'm not sure if she's a wife or just a girlfriend.
I think she's a girlfriend, if I remember.
Okay, so but the woman at the end of the day refused to be interviewed.
Right.
If you notice, she didn't cooperate. Yeah, right. And so Hill just says, that's I didn't. Yeah, I said it, but that's not what I meant, and blah blah blah. And the woman didn't testify because she knows that her gravy train is over too if he gets cut. So that's why. That's why. But sorry, go ahead. So your thoughts?
I mean, it's the whole thing is disturbing and gross, but none of it surprised me. Like it was exactly what I thought would happen.
Yeah.
It's a little bit. Kansas City. The one head scratcher is that they reward Tyreek Hill and cut. What's the running back's name? Was there good running back?
Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt. So there's a little bit of you take this moral stance, you cut Kareem Hunt in the middle of the season, blah blah blah, and then
you know why?
Protect Tyreek Hill.
Hunt. First of all, I'd argue that what Tyreek Hill did was worse than Hunt because at least what Hunt did was against an adult. I'm not in any way apologizing for Kareem Hunt. He's scum too, but at least what he did was an adult, whereas Tyreek Hill was a child. But Kareem Hunt got caught on video.
Yeah. Video.
That's it. Video rules. And also I think Kansas City is probably a bit irritated that they cut Kareem Hunt and saw him sign 2 days later to an AFC competitor. I don't know if 2 days, it's, I mean that hypothetically, but a few days later he's on another team. And so it's like, man, we did the right thing by getting rid of this guy. And then he immediately goes to another team. Screw that. We're not doing that again. I think the NFL and the next CB ought to come up with some sort of like personal conduct type cut. Where if you're cut for reasons of personal conduct, you cannot sign another contract with an NFL team for some X period of time.
Right. There's a penalty box aspect of it.
Yeah, because the Redskins did it with Reuben Foster, and the 49ers are probably irritated about that,
Well, they were.
I mean, it's like we cut him because of conduct reasons, and then, 3 days later he's with the Redskins, and it didn't work out and all that. I mean, in terms of injuries, but the NFL needs some sort of penalty box thing. That's exactly right, because but at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs cared more about Hill's talent. Kareem Hunt is replaceable. Tyreek Hill kind of isn't.
Right, and to your point about running backs, right? Like that was, and then LaShawn McCoy falls back into their lap. So,
right.
So yeah, it's also about the expendability of the position as much as anything else, right? And an elite speed wide receiver who doesn't take nearly the play-by-play abuse is a different commodity than a running back.
He's a returner, I mean, also, so yeah. It's just gross. I mean, you just, if you're an NFL fan, you just kind of have to accept that, teams care more about the talent of the Antonio Browns and Tyreek Hills of the world than they do a moral stance. The Redskins certainly aren't innocent of this. They've proven it too. I mean, if you're into morality, the NFL is probably not the league for you.
Right.
Sad to say.
All right. So with that, we'll leave the league. And we have not done this segment in some time, but we used to do a regular segment called As the LeVar Ball Family Turns, because it was a bit of a soap opera. We backed off. That they cooled out a little bit in general. They weren't necessarily in the headlines quite as much. They weren't devoid of the headlines, but they weren't in them as much, and for the same reasons. But we had an interest, and one of the things that we really liked being a sports business show was the kind of indie shoe company angle, and actually had tipped our hat to Ball Senior on some of those plays. But we may have seen both a crack or a split in the family dynamic, and definitely in the big baller brand. As I can never keep their names. What's the one that's already in the NBA? Lonzo signed a deal with Nike and publicly bashed the big baller brand shoe, just from a quality of the merchandise perspective. What did he call? Did he call it trash or garbage, or what did he say about the materials?
Something, one or the other. I don't have the exact word in front of me. Point is, he just openly admitted on a podcast. This was a podcast that Josh Hart. It's Josh Hart's podcast. Josh Hart was a former Laker teammate of Lonzo Ball, and they were all traded to the Pelicans in the
Antonio Davis.
Thank you, and the Antonio Davis deal. Okay, and so what happened was Lonzo is on Josh Hart's podcast, and they have a professional. They have a Chris Larry, there, who's like the host. But so Lonzo goes on this podcast and says, the shoes are trash. I knew it from the beginning, but I had to wear them because it had my name on it. But what he was doing, he had his agent bring 4 pairs of shoes every game, and he had to change shoes every quarter because the ZO2 shoe would be destroyed every quarter. He needed 4 pairs of shoes to get through the game.
He was running out of them by quarter.
Yeah, exactly right. He had to change shoes by quarter, or otherwise the shoes were going to blow up. And so I think the moral of the story here is, if you're just a guy, you can't design shoes. You can design shoes and sell them, but you can't design shoes fit for professional athletes in your garage. I don't really like Nike because of their political stances they've taken. I've sworn off all Nike products at this point and all that. But, there's a reason Nike and Adidas and Reebok, et cetera, are the best. They put millions of dollars of research into shoes, and so they can survive the rigors of professional sports. Lonzo actually in the podcast said, he was going to end up wearing Kobe's shoes, and Kobe's shoes are Nike. Which is what he ended up doing. He started wearing Kobe Bryant shoes halfway through the last season. And when he came up on the show before last year, the reason is that their manager, who's not a family member, but the guy who was sort of managing things for LeVar, ran off with $1.5 million. And that's why Lonzo kind of publicly said, I'm done with Big Baller Brand, and now he's bashing me even more, saying the shoes sucked and they always sucked, and he needed 4 pairs to get through every game. So the moral of the story here is, if you want to design and sell shoes, do it, but don't pretend like you can do it. You can make the quality at the level of Nike, politics aside, for professional athletes. And so I think LeVar has learned, or Lonzo at least has learned his lesson.
I'm pretty sure that the Big Baller brand does not have the R&D infrastructure to test the quality of their merchandise.
I'm sure their R&D infrastructure is zero. They probably have some manufacturer in China that they had a contract with, that they had no R&D in it whatsoever, and they just slapped their designs on them and sell them. That's probably what happened.
Yeah, a small aside, I have a friend who's an industrial designer, and he works for a sports company that mostly makes lacrosse, and then they're getting into hockey. So he knows that world. And he's always telling, and so I'm always kind of picking his brain about, because he'll go to China and he'll tour the factories, and, they have to deal with all that. And they have some contract, I think, with Nike coming up. And he said the rigor that, mostly probably driven by PR, but the rigor that Nike puts their factories go through, he said, is borderline insane. Like they almost like to the point where they almost questioned whether the contract was worthwhile, considering how many hoops Nike was making them jump to ensure the quality of the product.
Maybe Nike needs to move their manufacturing back to the United States. You don't have to worry about quality and paying children 2 cents a day to make shoes. If you just move the manufacturing back to the U.S. If you care so much about it, pay more, and manufacture where it's going to be done right.
My friend said the misconception is, though, at this point that he said that they are so obsessive about it that they probably are the best in the business in terms of some of that, in terms of like the quality of the factories that they will. It's like basically they've created a Nike certification program for factories with a book of checklists that have to qualify.
Well, Nike did have a shoe blow up.
Yeah.
It was who's the number one pick
Zion
in the NBA
Williamson.
draft? Thank you. Yeah, it was in the March Madness tournament, and as a result of that, Nike went crazy, and took many steps to put Zion in better shoes, and they researched it and all of that. I mean, again, politics aside, I hate their politics, and I'll never wear a Nike swoosh again. But in terms of that, if I was a professional athlete, I'd definitely go with a company like Nike or Reebok or Adidas or New Balance or whoever else. That's a name that if they do have a manufacturing defect in a shoe, they're going to own it. And they're going to fix it. And the odds of them having a thing like that are infinitesimally small compared to the Big Baller brand shoes, for example.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say, is it not safe to say that Big Baller brand is dead?
Well, if your biggest, none of the two other kids are nowhere near the NBA and may never be anywhere near the NBA. So when you're one NBA worthy representative has just trashed it's going to be difficult.
And he trashed it from New Orleans, not even L.A. Yeah, the younger kid has NBA potential. I get the names wrong. One is LaMelo. I always get their names mixed up. But the younger one has NBA potential. The middle one does not. He's not going to be an NBA player. He's not even a G League worthy player. But the younger one probably is going to be. If LeVar doesn't manage to screw him up even more, what that kid needs to do is go to some big time college program. Instead of, what his dad's doing to him. But that kid could theoretically be in the NBA someday. But that's, he's a couple years away from that still. Yeah, point is, I did admire LeVar's entrepreneurial spirit, but he's such an obnoxious jerk, that he's just really hard to root for. He's misogynistic. He's many times said inappropriate things to women on air in the middle of interviews. He said stuff to Colin Cowherd's female co-host. I can't remember her name. Grossly inappropriate, and he's done it several times. He trashed who's the woman that does First Take, who's the media moderator between Stephen A. Smith.
I haven't watched First Take in 8 years.
Molly Karam. He said something inappropriate to Molly Karam live on the air. LeVar Ball is, while I admire his entrepreneurial spirit, he's kind of a bad guy, in my opinion. So there's just no reason to think Big Baller Brand's going to continue on.
Well, just
whatsoever.
Like you wouldn't take your neighbor's homemade car onto I-95. You're not going to wear, your neighbor's homemade shoe into an NBA game.
I might wear, if I like the shoes, I might wear them around my neighborhood.
Right, walking the dog.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to wear them. And apparently the Lakers expressed concern to Lonzo, by the way, about this too. And that's when Lonzo finally switched over to the Kobe's. When the Lakers said, listen, you're getting injured, they were kind of blaming the shoe, which is probably true and accurate, because when you're talking about athletics at that level, the shoes actually matter a lot. And I think the Lakers were basically blaming the shoes on Lonzo's ankle injuries that he had, because he had multiple. So anyway, this may be I'm going to make a prediction here. This may be the end of the LeVar Ball as a Ball family turn segment. This might be the last time we hear from him. Not because we wouldn't do it if something comes up, but I think it's going to fade into obscurity.
It's been
personally.
The soap opera has been canceled.
Yeah, exactly right. The soap opera's canceled.
Steve, we want to do a quick update on the story that we'd followed over the last couple months and even the last year, which is this ridiculous lawsuit that the, passionate, dedicated, but misguided New Orleans Saints fans had been making. We also have an end to that saga as well. You want to give an update?
Yeah, okay, so the backstory behind this, if you guys remember, we talked about this at least once on the show. A group of fans, season ticket holders, or ticket holders at least, filed a lawsuit in New Orleans alleging basically a tort damages for the NFL, the poor officiating in last year's NFC Championship game, which led to the Saints' downfall. And I agree with him that the Saints basically that the refs cost the Saints a Super Bowl. They're not wrong in that. But in terms of a lawsuit, what I told you guys in the beginning was that these people have no standing. This is the dumbest lawsuit ever. And the attorney who brought it is just angling to become a hero to the city of New Orleans. Well, guess what? This is what happened. Exactly what I predicted. The NFL actually took this to the Louisiana Supreme Court. Took just an appeal to the Louisiana Supreme Court, which did in fact dismiss the lawsuit with prejudice. And the legal reasoning behind it was that, like I told you, the season ticket holders have no standing to bring a lawsuit. The NFL said what you did is you purchased a license to enter the stadium and watch a sporting event. You have no standing whatsoever to file a tort lawsuit claiming damages as a result of what you see on the field. And so that's dead, done, gone. And, another idiot, Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, who I love to bash, he wrote a piece on it on Pro Football Talk and kind of made it sound like somehow people's rights were being violated because what happens if there's legitimate fraud going on, meaning corruption, and if that's the case, the fans have no remedy. Well, that's true. The fans don't have a remedy because they have a license. The court is exactly right. You bought a license to watch a game, and that's it. And that's what the court said. The lawsuit's dead, but it was fun to follow for a while.
Yeah, if you have no dog in the fight, it was entertaining.
Yeah, exactly right.
All right, let's get out of here we'll follow up on one of Steve's predictions came true. So let's put a couple out there in the ether. Last season we did this as well. We just kind of give what is the It's Just Business style story that will come to play over the next 20 some odd weeks of the National Football League season. I'll start. I predict that both sides of the Jay-Z NFL marriage are going to have buyer's remorse here, and that story, and there will be weekly or regular reminders and issues that come from all different angles. I think it's going to be a myriad, but that will have been both sides basically regretting that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I kind of lamented the hiring of Jay-Z because I think it's going to be the end of halftime shows that I care about, but people got mad at the NFL for hiring Jay-Z because he's not woke enough or something. He wasn't, in enough solidarity with Colin Kaepernick, who's still a hero of, he's the king of wokeness at this point. And so I think both sides are kind of mad. People like me, I don't care if the NFL hires Jay-Z. I don't like Colin Kaepernick very much. I was just, that's probably going to be the end of the classic rock bands, at the halftime show, which kind of bums me out. But I think it's kind of backfired on the NFL a little bit because I think they thought hiring Jay-Z is going to make everybody happy, and instead the people who supported Colin Kaepernick were mad at Jay-Z and mad at the NFL because they viewed it as a slap in the face of Kaepernick, who's their hero. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's going to backfire a little bit.
Yeah, on all sides. I think there'll be shrapnel everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's going to ruin the halftime show for me. My prediction is this. Looking forward, we're going to hear over the next 20 weeks, more and more talk about getting the CBA done early without a strike. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but that's going to be the talk, and I think it's going to be less contentious a negotiation than it was 10 years ago. The reason is is that the NFL, as we've proven and as we talked about in the beginning of the show, the NFL is hyper aware that this is their 100th anniversary season, and what they do not want is CBA controversy coming into or out of their big centennial anniversary of the league. And so for that reason, I think both sides are a little bit more open to try to negotiate a solution than they were before. I don't think it's going to work, and I think there probably will be a lockout or a strike again. But I think you're going to see at least more willingness to negotiate than the last go around. You're going to hear about it earlier. We've already heard about it. You will continue to hear about it again because of the 100th anniversary. So that's my prediction.
All right, that's a good one. With that, we'll track those and see how we do. Enjoy. Well, you're going to come after this, so enjoy all the conversation post opening weekend of the NFL season. You can find, the Hogsty Network is the mothership. So at the Hogsty on Twitter, also at Just Business Pod. You can find Steve on the Hogsty Network, which I'm sure the content will be fast and furious over with the league starting, right? Do you have any commercials for Hogsty content?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Seasons of Discontent will be on Mondays during the season, so Rick and Matt can talk about the Redskins game. The Hogsty has transitioned to two shows a week. The game preview shows on Thursday, and then the game recap shows on Monday. That's good content. So, we've got the audio content has ironed itself out, and we've got certainly lots of other good stuff coming up.
All right, and you can find me at ChrisLarry33 on Twitter if you so desire. And with that, we will see you in 2 weeks. Enjoy the first couple weeks of football.